Welcome to the 40th episode of the E-commerce Leader Series podcast. Gosh, I can't believe it's already 40. The podcast dedicated to helping founders and operators navigate the future of commerce in the age of AI. I'm Eric Bidinger, the co-host, co-founder and CEO of Luca AI. And today's guest is Chris Raven, the CEO and co-founder of Heur. Chris and his team work with some of Europe's largest e-commerce brands, helping them scale through strategy, e-commerce operations, retention, paid media, fractional leadership. Chris will tell us all about it during our conversation. So Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Eric. I'm really glad to be here. Honored to be on the 40th episode. I didn't realize that it was a milestone for you.
It's a nice milestone. Hopefully you get to come on the 80th and the 120th, and we keep it as a...
Yeah, I'm open to it. Absolutely. Let's do it every 40.
There you go. Chris, for our audience, so you've worked with many e-commerce businesses over the years, and now you're leading Heur. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what inspired you to build the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in retail and e-commerce and sort of all things adjacent to that for worryingly 25 or so years now. So I've kind of seen e-commerce emerge really, and also seen people's access to at their fingertips data and analytics and insights emerge, which is obviously culminating in kind of AI tools today, which is interesting from a Luca scenario as well. But I think I've been through running dev agencies, Magento and Shopify, running client-side operations. So as sort of head of e-commerce director, I've been involved with multiple types of businesses and brands as a sort of chief marketing officer, from big four consultancy through to startups. So I've got quite a broad experience, and I thought with my co-founder, who's also called Chris, when we came to sort of start Heur, we thought, how can we help people in a way that they haven't been necessarily helped before, to prioritize, to understand where they should put effort in a kind of landscape of potential overwhelm. If you look at all the different channels that people could be putting effort into, all the money that they could be spending, all the people that they could be hiring. So we actually started 7 or so years ago doing a sort of marketing for brands, but in a lean, agile methodology manner. So we'd go in, we'd audit a company, in quite a lot of depth, interviewing them and talking to them, all very informal, and looking at all their data. And then we sort of build them a Kanban board, if you like, of all the stuff that they should do in month 1, month 2, month 3, that pointed at the commercial objectives that they'd talked to us about. So that was really well received. But I think the long story short, and how we've got to 30 staff in an agency that does e-com ops today, is that while brands loved the strategy, actually they didn't necessarily have the capability or the capacity to execute on the things we were suggesting, even if they agreed with them. And it isn't always about just adding another agency to the mix, depending on the size of your business. So yeah, we sort of responded to that in kind by building accidentally, really, an agency that was able to do that. And like many agencies, we kicked off and tried to do everything: SEO, CRO, paid media, CRM, everything, development. And we very quickly realized that was just sort of sitting in a saturated market of already very good agencies, and that wasn't the way to go. So we crafted this managed e-commerce proposition, which basically looks end to end at a brand's direct-to-consumer e-com channel and says, okay, give us it, we'll take ownership of it, we'll report to your board as if your wholesale director does, or your marketplace director or whatever, and we will own the P&L, we'll own the strategy for you, we'll work with you obviously collaboratively to get to the right objectives and direction of travel, but then we'll also execute everything for you along the journey. And we bolster that with customer acquisition and retention activities to complete the kind of growth picture. I think the areas that we've niched away from are areas where agencies have become very, very rigorously specialist, like search engine optimization, especially in the age of AI, and CRO, where really you need to be a development agency to truly get into CRO and UX and those things. So we've niched in a very comfortable way for us, but it's been, the managed e-commerce proposition has been well received for a spectrum of brands.
It's fantastic. Actually, it's fascinating. It's you're the first agency that we speak to that offers this end-to-end solution in a turnkey fashion. And you have clients located where, and how does that work in terms of embedding you and the team within your clients' workflows? And
great question. And clients come from all over. So the bulk of our client base is UK based, just naturally. But we've got some clients in the US, and we are talking to lots of people across the world. I think there are some pragmatic points of difference when you're talking to people in Australia. Actually, a lot of the stuff we need to do is sort of time zone sensitive for e-commerce and merchandising and responding to tasks on a daily basis. So there's a bit of that consideration, but we can service pretty much anywhere. We have stakeholders in different time zones, so that's an area of development for us. But we embed by giving people a dynamic team. So internally at the agency, we've built squads. So there are other people that do similar things to us. And maybe they put an individual in where they spot a need, and so they go, here's a body at a desk for you, and they'll perform that function. We don't do that. We go, here's a team, and the team is built for you, and we've built that team of e-com director, e-com manager, e-com exec, project manager, paid media manager, CRM manager, whatever that might need. And they are fully formed. They're already dynamic, working together. They've got cross experience across multiple sectors. We only hire experts. We're fully remote, right? So we can't really hire people who don't have autonomy and proactivity and don't have expertise and depth in their field. So by definition, we've got an amazing team of very high caliber individuals. So when you have them consolidated and working together, their ability to accelerate growth for brands and kind of find workarounds for problems. They've kind of seen it all before, with Shopify issues and Klaviyo issues and all those kind of things. So they know the direction to go in to streamline ops for people. And so we're essentially building the economy of scale on behalf of clients, and reducing the impact on them if they hired in-house and then somebody went on paternity leave or maternity leave, or they were sick, or holidays, even, which are legitimate. People should go on holiday, but because of the way our teams are structured, we can sort of smooth out that those gaps in resource. So just one benefit of it, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you look across all the brands that you work with, do you feel that the owners or the leadership team is asking today different questions than what they were asking 3 years ago?
Yeah, undoubtedly. Look, so growth is harder than it's been for a decade, right? There was a time when you could throw money at meta ads and your brand would grow. That hasn't been the case for a long time. But I think we operate almost exclusively with mid to high end premium brands and luxury brands. So I think the middle market, that market is definitely being squeezed hardest. There's a clear correlation that we've seen through things like COVID, cost of living crisis, credit crunches, and the sort of impact from the war in Iran that's maybe accelerated food prices and plastics prices and shipping issues, and lots of compound factors, macro kind of and geopolitical factors that do impact consumers buying from our brands and therefore the brands themselves. So I think that market's being squeezed hardest. Nobody wants to compete on price. And I think so the narrative has changed from why isn't this channel growing in the way that it was, to how do we communicate better why we're worth paying for. And I think compound with that, if you look at true luxury and the way that they don't use promotional activity or discount activity, I think there's a changing threshold with premium and luxury where they're becoming a little bit more promotional than they want to admit in some cases. So I think that, that's one aspect of it. A product of that is that customer acquisition has become a profitability problem as well. Winning isn't about just driving traffic and impressions anymore. It's really getting challenging to look at what that return means, and so that shifts the focus a little bit onto things like lifetime value and retention. So how are we absolutely making the most of every pound we spend on acquisition by making sure that every customer we acquire remains a customer or remains viable for us as a customer? What does that mean in terms of tenure with our brand over the lifespan of that, that relationship? So loads of considerations that are really day to day for founders. What I will say, and I want to err away from self-promotion here, but there's a notion that operational efficiency becomes a competitive advantage for brands in the space where they're having to think very carefully about how they spend on channel activity. So, if we can solve some of those problems for brands and let them focus on product development and brand development, actually that's really powerful in terms of the way that they can change the narrative with their consumers, if they're not then having to worry about, oh man, how am I going to actually manage my e-commerce proposition?
It's interesting. It's kind of universal what you're saying. It's a theme that comes back over and over again, and it's kind of the move away from the unitary KPI focus on one KPI and the shift towards return on that KPI, right? I mean, ultimately, people are starting really across the board. All the people that we speak to, whether it's on the podcast or in our corporate life, it really is now just return on investment, return on capital, payback time. I mean, payback. People are really focused on that, and for the right reasons, right? I mean, that's like you said, it becomes a competitive advantage to be able to run a business more efficiently, obviously.
Yeah, well, completely. But connected to that, I think the way that you obtain investment as a brand has probably changed as well now. So to your point about how are you communicating return on spend and showing growth, those KPIs have changed, those metrics have changed. I think investors in brands are looking at different durations of longevity, and they're looking at different types of history. So yeah, it's an interesting time, but it's also not it's an interesting time to be a problem solver in this space. But it's a challenging time for everybody. So I don't want to diminish it or undermine it. It's hard going at the moment for a lot of people. So yeah, I think we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I guess it affects everyone. The shift from the COVID area, ZERP area, where money was free and everyone was just focused on just growth, to now, profitability actually does matter a little bit, and 100 basis points of extra margin here and there is actually what makes the difference between being sustainable and not.
Yeah, completely. But and understanding that from your data is becoming a challenge, I think. Yep. So, for example, as you get larger, as your brand is bigger, you can probably start thinking about how you try and manipulate different channels. So you might hire a specialist agency for each one, but that's good. They're very good, but they're going to look at attribution from their standpoint. They're also going to sort of accelerate this notion that departments are becoming too siloed. So as a business, you're veering away from where you need to be, which is holistic thinking, really cohesive of your data, because businesses don't grow in channels, they grow commercially. So you can't optimize one area and ignore the interactions between every other function. And similarly, that abundance of data is great. Data has become really abundant, and you can kind of get a dashboard from every bit of the ecosystem, but the insight that is cohesive around that isn't as abundant. That's more scarce, I think. And the challenge isn't collecting metrics; it's identifying how you interpret it all to make the 3 or 4 decisions which will turn the needle this month. So, it's really interesting from my perspective, because Chris and I, my co-founder and I, we look at the stuff we were doing in 2019 to establish what's the right things to put effort into to turn the needle this month. That challenge hasn't changed. It's just that you've almost got to siphon through an overload of information now to get to the heart of how you make that decision and make that decision faster and more evidenced. So yeah, it's a really interesting time.
Yeah. I mean, everything you say obviously is music to my ears, right? It's a core, it's a core thesis of what we do. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day.
This isn't like that's product market fit, right? So I'm not actively trying to boost your proposition, but you've created something that does do that dot connection exercise.
There you go. Thank you. So you have the benefit of sitting across a portfolio of different brands, which I imagine are at different stages of growth. So can you tell us, can you distill a little bit what you think separates the one that consistently outperform versus everyone else? Like, are there any, nuggets of expertise or excellence in execution?
Yeah, and so I can highlight some. So short snappy things might be that they don't obsess over ROAS. A lot of the conversations we have at the beginning of an engagement are about what metrics really matter. So we've sort of touched on it already, but customer lifetime value is a more critical metric, especially if you have the luxury of not needing to be profitable on first touch point of sale. So that is rare, but it's also a factor that needs to be discussed. I think we try and talk about marketing efficiency ratio and contribution margin and things to people. It's because we're thinking about it from an holistic e-commerce standpoint. So winning brands are looking at those kind of metrics. They're not just going, what's my ROI? What's my return on specific ad spend? What's my CPA? Then they're not in that space. Their mindset is evolved from that. I also think that they probably understand their customer really, really well, potentially better than their competitors in the space. So I'm not talking there about demographics as such, but I'm talking about their motivations, their behaviors, the buying triggers. What are they resonating with the brand, with the product? That's really, really important at the moment. I think a lot of the brands that we work with that are seeing the best growth, and it's sort of we've removed maybe some spikes because of a particular demand in a particular area, or a brand new brand, or like something that's an outlying data point. If we think about the brands that are consistently growing, they're really moving into building kind of systemized activity. So rather than thinking, I need to do a campaign, they're not doing a campaign, even if that campaign mindset is multi-channel, which is great. They're thinking much more around, what's my trading calendar for the year? Mm-hmm. How does that feed into my brand marketing calendar? What systems do I need underneath that? What processes do I need to make sure that this bit is all repeatable or orchestratable? Yeah. And then they have the ability to be reactive to weather or fashion trends or something else that they need to be reactive to. So you can have the best of both worlds there. You can react and create spikes with specific activity and campaigns, but you also have your systems to create predictable growth. Yeah. So that's really important, and that's an area where we really, really dive in hard, especially on things like trading calendars and creating those kind of predictable systems. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that's interesting, that's emerging from multiple areas in our kind of e-commerce agency sphere. So we obviously have the agency world and we have the brand world, and they're often, the Venn diagrams don't always intersect, right? So it's interesting that lots of people at the moment are talking about kind of the loyalty gap, and I would hook that to the fact that retention is treated as a true profit engine by brands that are really doing well. So they're not doing the tick box basics and then just let it fit and forget. They're treating that retention mechanism, whatever that might entail, from straight up email flows and SMS flows and referral mechanisms and that kind of basic stuff. That they're looking at it from a subscription standpoint. They're looking at it from a loyalty and ambassador and advocacy generation standpoint. They're also looking at how do we build community, because community connects with brand and with product. So that's an interesting, that's never really not been the case, but I think it's being more widely brought into focus now. So we work often with a a company called Quickfire, who are a development agency, and Martin Harper, one of their co-founders, recently published an article on the loyalty gap. And the central argument is sort of that brands have spent years optimizing customer acquisition, but they haven't invested proportionately in keeping customers engaged after that first purchase. So that we do see that. Quickfire thinks that the next wave of e-com growth is going to come from closing that gap rather than continually increasing acquisition spend. So that absolutely tracks with what we've been talking, and I think that the loyalty gap is true. So winning brands are working actively on increasing that repeat purchase rate and increasing lifetime value as a product of that, but also revenue per recipient on activities that they do. But I think there's also two other gaps that are adjacent to that, which winning brands are addressing. So the execution gap, which we've already talked about, how they know what they're supposed to be doing. How can they actually do it? Do they have the capacity? Do they have the ownership? Do they have the operating rhythm? Growth gets lost if they don't have that. And again, that's fundamentally what we inject. Mm-hmm. I think they're also the brands that are doing well in this space are kind of commercially aligned. There's a bit of a commercial alignment gap. So again, back to the kind of siloed departments. Paid media could be chasing ROAS. CRM, email could be chasing opens. That's totally the wrong metric. Merchandising are chasing sell-through. Finance chasing margin and maybe putting constraints on. Ops are chasing efficiency. None of that comes together to give somebody ownership of commercial performance. So and big companies, big brands, maybe who've started in the B2B world, are brilliant at that because they have like an IT team and a commercial director and a commercial team and then a brand marketing team. They just happen to be quite poor at e-commerce direct to consumer if they've opened that channel. So that's the gap we see most often. And so I think, Martin's 100% right? Like retention is one of the biggest untapped growth levers, but I think we take that one step further and say it becomes an operating model problem. Loyalty isn't created by email, it's created by communicating about better products, but then having better fulfillment to give better customer experience, and then better ability to merchandise based on your product launches and reactivity to macro factors and and there's so many things like that, and that loyalty or CRM proposition or retention proposition as a channel simply amplifies things rather than necessarily being a driver.
No, absolutely. Look, I've been nodding the whole time. I mean, this was great. I mean, it should be mandatory, MBA style lecture for everyone, because everything you say is common sense.
No.
And unfortunately, common sense is not very common. That's the irony of it. But just this loyalty gap. I mean, for us, we're in a business that's obviously very different. We're B2B and we're subscription. It has to be a philosophical alignment within the company that if a client is going to be with you for 365 days, in our case, on day one of that relationship, you need to work to make sure that you maximize the probability that on day 365 that client continues with us. And you have 365 days to do it. And this is on an 80-20 basis, it's 80% of our time with only 20% spent on new clients. Because again, it's so hard to acquire new clients, and like you said so eloquently, like the untapped mind of all your existing clients that you could just increase an LTV with. I don't. It's interesting. I mean, it seems so obvious, and yet it's not. People are slowly waking up to that.
I think it becomes part of the overwhelm challenge because there's so many things that you could change, so many things that you could do. So you end up maybe not doing any of them, and it's the challenge doesn't change from an agency standpoint. To your point, we also like to work with people for a long period of time. Like if we get a brand come and engage with us, we do not want to work with them for 3 months and then that relationship end. We want it to be a 12, 24, 36 month engagement. We've got brands who've worked with us for more than 5 years. So I feel very proud of that, and we strive for that with everybody who comes across our desk. So exposing the inner workings of an agency. But we recently did a team day where we get everybody together because we're fully remote, like I say. So people from Scotland to Cornwall, literally, we have people at everybody, all four corners of the UK. We brought them together and we did some fun stuff as well, but we also did an exercise where we essentially mapped our client's journey with Heur and said, okay, from the point where they've never heard of us to the point where they leave, they churn, or they become an advocate or whatever. Like, because sometimes brands churn with us because we've done really well, and they've been acquired. We've turned it around and they've been acquired by a bigger brand portfolio or something like that. So often that's the worst way to lose a client for us, because we've done really well. But look, so we mapped that whole journey with all the touch points, and then we kind of reverse engineered how we would want that to go in the best possible way by looking at how the worst experience could be generated. So we said, okay, what's the worst thing we could possibly do if we were trying to build the most awful experience, the worst agency in Britain? What would we do here? And we looked at the emotional response and how clients might react. So we like to think we have a sort of very empathetic, ego-free quality about everybody in the team. So that was really important to understand, that if you're getting a reaction, what's driving that reaction? It's probably something that's a product of this mix of experiences that they've had. So and then it becomes really easy to flip it on its head and say, okay, well, the opposite of that is clearly the best experience here. So to your point, 80-20, we also spend 80% of our time thinking, how are we making our clients' experience the best possible experience? And are we genuinely giving them quality output? Are we moving the needle for them? Like, because if we're not, then there's no point. So we've got to be doing that. That's how we think as well.
No, exactly. And then double clicking a little bit on what you said earlier about this feeling of being overwhelmed. I mean, I think, look, we all experience it, right? Your clients are experiencing it. You experience it, I'm sure, in the agency. We experience it as well, because the world is what it is, and we're just drinking from a fire hose of data, and everyone is just fighting fires on a daily basis. That's just the state of play. But you have to be able to, and to tie it back to what we're talking about earlier, you have to be able to, in that fuzzy and crazy world where you're feeling overwhelmed, you have to be able to think in terms of returns, right? So what are the low-hanging fruits here? What are the things that I can execute quickly that are going to result in quick wins, big wins? And that's how you make your 1,000-mile journey one step at a time. But you have to choose which step you go on first, and that makes a very big difference. But again, there you have another Pareto rule, right? The 20% of the actions that you're going to take are going to result in the 80% improvement. And if you do that backwards, it's not great.
And it involves difficult decisions sometimes, right? So I totally agree, and I think that this comes back to the data view as well, because if you can very quickly get a very high quality consolidated view of all your data points, and in a way that it presents to you the key KPIs, then you can make decisions faster. So the overwhelm goes away because you're more empowered to do it. But there was a couple of news stories that caught my eye today, knowing that I was coming to talk to you, and they're really almost like opposite sides of the same coin. So I noticed that John Lewis, which is obviously an institution in the UK, are cutting 200 roles in retail stores. So like in-store bureau de change desks and dedicated gift wrapping services. So kind of like premium add-on elements, but they're cutting those. Are they cutting? I think they might be reallocating resources, but ultimately it's about customer adaptation. They're obviously responding to the fact that consumers are not using the services in the same way as they were. And then I also noticed that Gymshark, which is obviously sort of like a unicorn Shopify brand, so they're appointing a new chief technical officer. Now, I think that signals that they're elevating digital leadership, and they're probably connecting it more into their commercials. The shift in needing a CTO, or the shift in type of CTO, is probably the story here. So 5 years ago, brands needed CTOs because they needed technology. They needed people to do okay, what platform choices shall I make? How do I integrate those platforms? Do we need a WMS? Do we need an ERP? Do we need a PIM? All that stuff. I hate acronyms, but some people will know what those things are. I think that Gymshark is hiring a CTO now to talk about building competitive advantage through technology. So they're not there to keep systems running. This is probably to look at how are they going to use AI to become a multiplier for better forecasting, better inventory, better data, faster experimentation, better personalization, more efficiencies. Like that's the competitive advantage for a £1 billion brand now. So I think they look like totally different stories. One's taking roles away or reallocating, the other's hiring senior leadership, but they're responding to the same trend, right? Retail's less about selling products and it's more about building the organization that can adapt faster than anyone else to customer behavior changes. So I just thought that was a really really interesting kind of like pinning of the shift in dynamics in our industry.
No, absolutely. Actually, very good segue into the next topic and bring it to AI. I mean, obviously, everyone's talking about it. In your word, like, what do you think is the biggest misconception that founders have about AI, or that brands have about AI?
I think there's two. I think one is that right now, and they may change. They may change very quickly. I think the first one is that they think that AI can execute. So, Shopify Sidekick, Klaviyo can Composer. These are things that are in our world right now. If you try and get them to do tasks that humans currently do, you'll quickly find that they go, I can't do that. Or like, even so we're talking about in-platform use of API activity, and they go, the API doesn't actually allow me to do that thing. So I think a lot of people are thinking that AI can kind of do the doing, and I think it will be able to, but it can't now, for the most part. The second point is assessment of risk, and I qualify that by saying AI can very quickly misdirect you confidently.
Yeah.
And if you don't mark its homework, you could carry on track that AI has suggested, and you could absolutely destroy elements of your business or your entire business. I think there's I'm being scaremongering a little bit there, but I think there's a world in which you could be a product entrepreneur now, and you've created something amazing, and you go, well, how do I get this out? How do I start selling it? And there is a clear route, clear and efficient route where you go, I'll just use the Shopify ecosystem, and I'll use AI, and I'll just tell it, give me a go-to-market strategy, tell me what to do, tell me what to set up, and it'll give you probably a decent stab at that. Mm-hmm. Problem is when you then start saying, okay, right, now I've made my first £10,000 a month. How do I take that to £100,000 a month? Where should I be spending the money? I think that if you get misdirected on that track, you're bankrupt very quickly, and that's not what anyone wants to see, frankly. So I think there's people need to be aware of risk and quality of output, and they need to also be aware that I think that AI right now can't actually replace true execution work.
So well said. I mean, you really have the finger on the pulse here. I couldn't have said it better. You have to be agentic capabilities. It's going to come. We're experimenting with it internally. I mean, we're using Luca with Luca, so we're dogfooding the product that we have. And so obviously we're playing around with some agentic workflows. It's actually quite hilarious to see where it fails, because it's like obviously in the most unexpected areas. And then, don't get me started about the hallucination problem. I mean, we're talking about it, we're smiling. It's not funny. It's a big issue. The problem is 50%, if you don't know what you're doing, 50% of the advice is good and 50% is garbage. You don't know which one is which, because both are going to be said with 100% authority.
Yeah, and this is it's a weird emulation. It's a weird digital emulation of something that we saw in human talent pools and skill sets. over the last decade. So obviously, generationally, there's a group of professionals that have grown up with social media, with TikTok, with Snapchat, that kind of thing, and they, over the last 10 years, they have been excellent, like fundamentally incredible at developing social media channels. For example, this is one example, there's lots of them, but we've seen this lots of times, so it comes to mind. And then you get a social media manager who's excelled, and they are promoted into an e-commerce manager or like a marketing manager's position, but actually they don't have the breadth and depth of multi-channel awareness and knowledge behind those roles. So we've seen a sort of like false spike in things happening and activities in some brands, and then it sort of gets almost like ironed out or goes into a trough because the sort of weaknesses of that team are then exposed. That's not unilateral, obviously, but we've seen instances of that we can sort of refer to.
Yeah.
I think the AI version of that is exactly as you just described. It's people who don't actually know what they should be looking for as an output that's good, or what is this, what is accurate, or what is quality in terms of an output, and they just take it as read, whatever they get out. So that is going to create, I think, a similar spike and trough effect. So yeah, look, as an agency, and I know lots of our peers in the industry are thinking exactly the same way, one of our almost like built-in services has got to be AI empowerment for brands. We've got to help them stay on the right track, and they need to trust us with that, because we're not in the game of saying, no, you can't do AI for that. You still need to pay us to do it. That I don't care about that. Like if AI can do it, we'll use it, because where we see it is, if AI can do something, that's removing lower value work from our humans, and our humans are great people, so they can become exceptional by having AI free up their time. I also saw something today which was really pertinent, and what we're actually trying to do. So there's a kind of marketing guy from the US called Blair Enns. You may have come across him, Win Without Pitching. He's pretty famous, but he said today something along the lines of, if AI frees your time up for your humans to spend more time interacting with humans, then that's a win. And so, 6 months ago, we were saying to our teams, if you can use AI to accelerate productivity in these areas, and you get time back, use that time to go and book meetings and have face-to-face time with your clients, with your founders, and that is super valuable, like on every level.
Of course. I mean, it's one of those commonsensical things that unfortunately I don't think is very common. You should always strive to use AI to automate your job away so you can focus on higher value tasks, right? I mean, and that's what we do internally as well, is like, how can I automate myself away from, or I can abstract myself away from what I'm doing today using AI. So speaking of which, imagine we're sitting here in 2030. What do you think will surprise you the most about how e-commerce businesses operate then?
It'll still rely on common sense, but common sense is great on paper and doesn't translate well often into the real world. What will surprise me most in 2030? Okay, so 4 years away. Had to think for a second. That's not that far. There's two branches here that I immediately think of, and one is that not much has changed, because we're sort of in an era of AI over-promising and not actually being able to live up to it. So there's a possibility here that we spend another 4 years almost in a sort of very gradual stasis of where we are now, and maybe maybe it's able to do some things, but the realization is that ultimately it's an amazing research tool and an amazing code tool or whatever, and you can build some incredible things, but it's fundamentally not going to replace the humans in the way that the world thought. So I suspect there's going to be an element of that, and maybe there'll be some crazy shift between 2030 and 2050, and I'll prove totally wrong in the future. But yeah, who knows? I think that's one angle. The other angle is that it does very quickly become able to do a lot more than we predict, but it gets monetized too hard and prices most people out of the market. I think there's OpenAI, sure, theoretically free forever in some respect, but we're already seeing that not to be the case. If you want your data protected, you need to pay. If you want to access the most up-to-date versions, the most capable versions, you have to pay. So I think that there's definitely a sort of an enterprise acceleration challenge that people may face, where and that's going to be particularly difficult for people who've invested heavily in it, and become an AI first business in whatever respect, because if they then can no longer afford the Claude fees or the GPT payment or whatever to kind of do the same work, that doesn't stack as a business model. So those are the two things that I think maybe would or wouldn't surprise me. I'm not sure I've answered that question very well.
No, it's very good, very interesting. I mean, look, consider it an invitation to speak again in July 2030, and then we'll play that clip.
What do you think, out of interest, because you're really embedded in this and we're sort of peripheral compared to you, so what do you think is going to surprise you by 2030? I'm genuinely interested to know.
Thank you. Look, I'm continuously surprised by the slope of improvement doesn't seem to flatten, and we're always I think I agree with you about the over-promising and the under-delivering. We're in that phase now where people are just getting a little bit more rational about what those things can do and can't do. But we're also very bad. We're overestimating on the short term and underestimating on the long term, right? So if we take a 4-year window, I think agentic is going to be something that works at scale with confidence, with auditability, traceability, reversibility. So, you're going to be able to literally assign objectives, press a button, and then come back a few days later. So I maybe, utopic a little bit, but I think 4 years we're going to be able to do that. On your last point about the model, it's very interesting because that's a conversation that is very topical at the moment, and it's something that's shifted on a dime over the last 3-4 weeks in Silicon Valley, and it's model sovereignty. And it has nothing to do with China versus the US. It has everything to do with, as an enterprise, relying on OpenAI and Anthropic. Ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you pay or not. Your workflows are going to be used to train their models at scale. And I think people are, so large enterprises right now are realizing that this is happening. And ultimately, what's an alpha for a company? It's all your company's knowledge, it's your organizational knowledge, it's all the USP, it's all your know-how. And if that leaks out to the outside world through training via a model that then shared with your competitors, it just doesn't work. All of this to say that we're starting to see the shift where people are, for the first time in 20 years, thinking about, well, actually, I'm going to buy some servers, I'm going to run open source models locally in my building, on my data, not send anything to the internet, to the cloud. And even us are starting to think about doing this as well. Running one GPU in our office just as a test, just to see, what kind of results we can get with that. And it's pretty good, actually. So, most of the tasks, you don't need the latest models. You don't need Fable 5. You don't need Opus 4.8. I mean, most of the tasks today still are research and copywriting or image generation. You can use open source models for that. So, I'm positive in the sense that I think the capabilities are going to surprise us in 4 years' time, but also interesting to see that the industry is shifting away from what we have today, which is almost a duopoly between two companies, Frontier Labs, towards a much more fragmented, very long tail of a lot of open source models, and people are going to run their models locally and then tweak them for their particular use case, etc.
So I think that seems very, very logical and sensible, and I definitely get where you come from and agree with you. I think there's an accessibility challenge there then. So I sort of purposefully stuck to talking about Claude and ChatGPT, but you can, I think, evident. I think there's been some evidence that people can do the kind of task execution stuff with things like OpenClaw, but the sort of activation energy that you need to be able to set that up and do it and connect it safely or potentially not safely, I think that's excludes it from being mainstream. Whereas logging into a browser and asking something in a train of thought analysis or a train of thought conversation is immediately
exactly. And there's going to be a market opportunity there, right, for people to come with a turnkey solution, right?
Back to risk for me becomes, and it should do for all people looking at that, I think, is what risk level am I comfortable with?
100%. Great. Chris, rapid fire questions to finish up. Some tough ones and some easy ones.
Oh goodness, okay.
Meta or Google?
Google.
Good. AI Copilot or another hire?
We're still in another hire territory.
This one is an easy one. Profitability or growth?
Profitability.
Nice. And finally, the last one, morning workout or evening unwind?
Oh, morning workout.
There you go. Great. Look, this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed it. I hope our audience did too. Chris, for our audience, where can they find you and Heur?
They can find us on the web, www.heur.co.uk. That is HEUR from the word heuristic. You can find me on LinkedIn, my co-founder on LinkedIn, or email us at askforhelp@heur.co.uk. Thank you.
Fantastic. Love the conversation. Thank you very much for your time, Chris.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you, Eric.
We'll see you on the episode 80.
And then 120,
120. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys on the next episode.